Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 67, John and Blittle League Blaseball. Blittle League Blaseball is a actual play that focuses on a Little League team that's fighting monsters and other creatures of the dark, and is also connected to an interesting little bit of internet history. Listen in. All right, today I'm here with John from Blittle League Blaseball. Am I saying that right?
You are. That is as accurate as we could possibly make it.
All right. Yeah. So this is a fun one, actually. I feel like the origin for your actual play podcast or show. I guess it's podcast, mostly on YouTube though. And we'll get into that. But like it's sort of a fantasy baseball. Is that right?
Yeah. So during actually, I think it was about 5 years ago. They just celebrated their anniversary. A online asynchronous kind of mass role-playing game called Blaseball was created, in which, essentially a group of brave programmers created what I describe as a fantasy baseball simulator with no actual baseball, and also there's horror in it. So, like, players could kind of wager fictional currency and root for these imaginary Blaseball players, and the online community of this thing really kind of drove a lot of the creation. And so there were wikis set up and tons of fan art and all of these kind of like ancillary and supplementary artistic endeavors. Mm-hmm. And so one of the supplementary artistic endeavors is the TTRPG Blittle League, which I am the GM of, and we have 4 regular players. And one of those players, Joey, was and is a very big fan of Blaseball. And so he asked me, because he and I have performed together a lot. We both do improv, and we both game together. He said, "Hey, would you want to run a role-playing game kind of set in this Blaseball universe?" And I said, "Sure, what do you want it to be?" And he said, "Modern and horror." And we went from there. But ironically enough, Blaseball is no longer here. Blaseball, the wonderful programmers behind it, stopped making Blaseball. But Blittle League continues on with, a wonderful following and wonderful fans, and so yeah. we love doing it.
Yeah, more than 100 episodes now. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take a step back and tell us about who you are outside of Blittle League and RPGs. So
sure.
Who is John?
So yeah, my name's John Serpico. I'm the game master of Blittle League, but when I'm not doing that, I've been performing, teaching, directing, and producing improvisational and sketch comedy for about 20 some odd years, 22, 23 years. I'm also adjunct faculty. I teach at a business school, and I work in finance. But what's nice is I can put all of that stuff aside when I get to do the improv stuff and the TTRPG stuff. Yeah, I teach an improv and role-playing class at various improv theaters throughout the country as a way to get fans of improv into TTRPGs and players of TTRPGs into improv. So,
is this through Comedy Sports or a different organization?
No, different. It's so Comedy Sports. I'm a big fan of them, by the way. They're kind of they're a national brand. They have outposts all over the place,
right.
And they perform often within kind of independent comedy theaters. It's those comedy theaters themselves that I perform at, or I do this class at, and I also do it at improv festivals. I do it at the Penny Arcade Expo, places like that.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. That's a very varied career that you have there, with lots of different pieces to it, which is neat. And I also think that kind of experience can make you a better DM, because then you're more used to different points of view and can play those different kinds of characters.
Hey, I found that. I always say that improv is a superpower. You never really feel out of place if you're an improviser and you've learned how to do it, because it kind of teaches you how to manage conversations. and I often say, improv kind of allows you to float in any conversation regardless of the power dynamic. Like, you could be talking to the CEO of a company, or you could be talking to a friend, or meeting someone for the first time. And no matter what, like, the improv training kind of allows you to navigate the conversation. And so I think between, that and teaching finance and working in business, I'm used to having conversations with all sorts of like asymmetric power dynamics in them. Sometimes I'm a teacher, and sometimes I'm talking to executives, and everything in between. So those are definitely transferable skills to tabletop as a GM, because in those worlds, you're playing NPCs, you're switching between all these different power dynamics, and the ability to, I think, do so seamlessly and kind of with kind of an acting mindset is I found it to be super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. There's the easiest way to pay to get like DM training is to take improv classes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it kind of makes you good at everything. It's sort of like a sneaky way to, like, I'll put it to you this way. You're not investing in like individual skill points when you take improv. You're like bumping like a trait. Like you just suddenly you're not investing points in charisma or you're not investing points in persuasion or deception. You're just dumping it right into charisma. Like, you get a bonus modifier to everything. And I think it makes people more observant and makes people more decisive, which I think is very valuable for TTRPGs as well. Like, you as a DM get to be much more confident in your ability to just go with what the players want to do if you're kind of living in that improv mindset.
Yeah. And I think it also trains you to think about your reactions before you have them, kind of.
Yeah, I'd say so. You're, one of the things about kind of improv that you learn, there are all different kinds of improv. Like Comedy Sports that you mentioned before does short form improv. So that's like games, and there's like a host that comes out and says, all right, we're going to play a game, and the game has these rules, and you're going to clap at this time. It's called short form because it's game based and the audience sees the rules. Then there's long form improv, which is more narrative. It could be, an hour-long play with recurring characters. It could be functionally indistinguishable from scripted theater. But even though in long form, the audience doesn't necessarily know the rules, the performers know the rules. And because of that mindset, if you're on stage and you're an improviser and you say something to your fellow improviser, because they're following the same rules, there's only a finite number of things they can say back to you. So, it's almost like every time I say something to my players, for instance, it's almost like my mind looks at it like, they're going to come back with one of 4 or 5 dialogue choices. And I know what they're going to be. My players always surprise me, of course, but, in improv, if you walk on stage and say, all right, another beautiful day on board the space station, your scene partner is not going to say, we're not a space station, and I don't know you, and we're in a park, and I hate you and this game. Like, that's not going to happen. So there's a finite number of responses that either improvisers or players send back to you, and you can kind of feel like you're prepared for those, even, or dare I say, especially if you don't have anything written down in your GM notes. You just know that whatever they say to you, you will be able to roll with.
Yeah.
Ideally, while staying in character too.
Yeah. And I feel like that's reflected in the system you chose, because you chose Monster of the Week, which is a Forged in the Dark system, I think, which has a lot of more emphasis on creative stuff instead of, what's the right item and move for this action. It's more like, just, do what you want.
Exactly. I think D&D. So I knew this game. I knew would be streamed. I knew it would be a podcast. We record it live on Twitch, and so when Joey, the producer, said, hey, let's do a TTRPG, we're going to stream it. I didn't want to use D&D or Blades in the Dark or some Warhammer 40K system where it's just handfuls of dice and the constant management of character sheets. There is a joy in that, but I wanted something that was kind of rules light and plot and character heavy, just because I'm in it and the other four regular players are all improvisers of pretty tremendous skill and experience. We knew most of this was going to be improvised, so and because of that, because we knew there'd be a live audience. Because we knew that we had 5 improvisers doing it, I didn't want the rules to get in the way. I wanted everything to really kind of move and feel like a play. Like there have been times where we've gone, our shows are anywhere between, 60 and 90 minutes. There are times where we may roll dice 3 or 4 times the whole time, and that's it.
Yep.
And that's just by design.
I have the exact same experience when playing Blades in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse. You can have a whole 3-4 hour session with no die rolls sometimes just because it's not needed. Like you know how you want to resolve a situation without having to introduce some random element to it.
Yeah, I mean the way I kind of describe the rules of Monster of the Week at the start of every podcast is, when the players want to do something, the outcome of which is uncertain, they roll some dice. And often in life, the outcome of something, while not completely certain, I don't want to make folks roll to check for traps all the time, because that's not what I want to do. That's not what this show is.
Right.
If they're having like a heartfelt conversation with, a sibling or a dear friend or an enemy, I don't want charisma checks every 30 seconds. I want the two of them to hash it out like we're watching, a 2-shot in a movie or, some Mammoth play where they're just going at each other and the dialogue itself will kind of push to some resolution.
I wanted to take another step back and kind of go through this story in a chronological way for tracking how you came to RPGs and then came to Blaseball and the podcast creation. So let's start with when did you start playing RPGs? How did you get started?
Let's see. I was a teenager, so we're talking several decades now, and a friend of mine ran a couple of D&D sessions, and then I ran a couple of D&D sessions, and I thought that was pretty fun. And then in college, this is one of the more interesting ways to get into GMing, I suppose, is I was a mascot in college. So I wore an eagle suit. I'd run around at football games. I know how to fire a T-shirt cannon.
Nice.
And it was a tremendously transferable skill. T-shirt cannon operation is applicable across a variety of fields, and
I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And another guy that was the mascot with me. Like we were halftime at a football game, and he was like taking off the bird suit, and I was putting on the bird suit. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come see an improv show with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've never seen an improv show, but yeah, sure." And the improv show was it was a show called Quest, and the improv show. So it's that long form improv I was talking about. So really like a big long scenic play. That show was developed, I later learned, with the cast getting together and playing D&D together. Like that's how they kind of generate. It was either D&D or 7th Sea. I can't remember. But that's how they generated the characters. That's how they generated the backstory and the world and all those things. I was absolutely enamored with the improv, and that's when I started doing improv, was soon after that. But also it was a nice reminder of how cool playing role-playing games are when I don't want to say everybody's an actor, but when everybody is just like fully serving the story. Like when everybody kind of puts their egos aside and just like jumps in and does essentially a play together at the table.
Mhm.
So, I'm in college, I start doing improv, I start GMing again, and both of those things have continued nonstop for 20 plus years. So, they often kind of interact with each other. A lot of folks that I've done improv with, taught improv to, directed in shows, been in shows they directed, often end up in a, variety of little knots of game groups that I'll either play with or GM with. But yeah, I think like a lot of folks, a lot of what I GM'd early on was D&D, like, 3.5. For
Right.
years and years and years, I primarily ran 7th C, which is really, really fun. It's one of those systems that also has a world attached. And that's a blast. The dice mechanics are fun. It's like Monster of the Week in that the dice rolls kind of create an opportunity for story very easily, but mechanically they're very different. So,
Yeah, I was going to say
yeah.
it. I don't think it's very much like Monster of the
No,
Week.
no,
But
very
then
different.
you finished your thought. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, especially the seventh C second edition is a wild thing to GM, because it's not like, okay, roll to hit. Okay, they hit you back. Okay, roll to hit again. It's like, all right, you're in a burning building. You have half a dozen things to do. We're going to talk about it all in broad strokes. It's like you're dealing with, scripting out an act of a play instead of a scene of a play. So that, by its very nature, forces GMs to think about narrative and think about story in ways they wouldn't otherwise. Is that similar to Monster of the Week mechanically? Absolutely not. But the end result is a narrative first mindset with, not a lot of time spent like managing encumbrance or, seeing how many things you can do before your next short rest or anything like that.
Yeah. I can see that for sure.
So yeah, well, that's been going on for a couple decades now. At this point, the classes like the improv and role playing classes I teach are system agnostic. Like everything I try to teach, whether you're using like a super rules heavy system, I joke that like everything I say is probably as useful in Riddle of Steel as it is in Kick Ass and Chew Bubble Gum.
Yeah. So you're doing your improv, doing your RPGs, got your career going, and then you get into Blaseball at some point. So how did you even find it?
COVID does strange things to people and societies.
Fair.
I mean, what ended up happening was I was, when COVID kind of hit the world, it affected, on a macro level, a bunch of different industries, a bunch of different ways, and has fundamentally changed America and the world and all. But, the way it affected me in particular was that from when I graduated college to early 2020, I was probably teaching 1 or 2 improv classes a week, performing in 1 or 2 shows a week, directing a thing a week. I was surrounded by a bunch of artists that were super excited to work together. We got to be in front of an audience every 48 hours doing something. We toured the country. We did all these fun things in person, hearing audience laughter, interacting with a crowd. And then one day we just couldn't anymore. And so in my kind of group, my kind of theater community where I am, we're based in Boston, all of a sudden there were hundreds of people that were used to regularly getting that dopamine hit from performing in front of 50, 100, 200, however many people a week. And now we're just sitting around at our computers. And so a bunch of people migrated into doing like radio dramas, sketch comedy that could be filmed asynchronously. And in my case, live stream TTRPGs. So I started doing, online sketch comedy. I did a radio play, and I did like 2 or 3 live stream TTRPGs on, a comedy Twitch channel. And I was suddenly I went from being like an in-person artist type to like an online artist type. And, that's the closest I've ever got to like being a streamer. And that's kind of how I discovered Blaseball. Is Blaseball, whereas I, tumbled into the world of like online content, Blaseball was already there. And Blaseball is, again, like a fantasy baseball role-playing horror thing. And that's like that really scratched kind of an itch for me and a lot of my comedy friends. And so we kind of glommed onto that, and we started watching it as fans. And because so much Blaseball content was fan generated, Joey, the producer of Blittle League, he and I became Blaseball broadcasters. So even though it's essentially fantasy baseball, there's no live games, there's not video, you're just like watching stats roll across a screen. Me and Joey would do commentary on that, like we were in a booth at Yankee Stadium or something. And then we kind of folded into Blaseball that way, and so we were like kind of half fans, half creators. And and then Little League came out of that. And of all the different like online classes and online shows and things like that were born of that COVID time, the Blittle League show is the only one that's still going. As you said, we're over 100 episodes. At time of recording, I think we're at 138 plus a couple of specials. And, we do this show on average 2 to 3 times a month. So, you kind of math that out long enough, and we've been doing it for, 4-ish years, really, since the middle of COVID.
Yeah, I was curious about your recording schedule, because typically, like, when I find a actual play podcast, it's either like a huge 3-4 hour chunk per episode, or they chop their episodes into like half-hour or 1 hour chunks. But for those half-hour, 1 hour chunks, usually they're recording like 3, 4, 6 hours in a day, and they'll record like once a month or something. And your episodes are like 1.5 hours of a single Monster of the Week plot, at least from the early ones I've listened to. It's
Monster of the Week, not just the name of the system, but also kind of the ethos. Like, do an encounter, have it be one session. We've done kind of not just cliffhangers, but like multi episode kind of like mini series. Like, they're broken up into seasons. Like, we're kind of in the second half of season 3, and there's usually a time jump between seasons. Mm-hmm. But we record it 90-ish minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, self-contained. And, that's twofold. Like, the reason why we do it is twofold. One, it just kind of makes sense as a theater production. If I go and see a play and it's more than 60 minutes, I want an intermission. If it's more than 2 hours, that is my whole day. Like, it's just one of those things where I'm a big fan of movies that are 90 minutes. So I want sessions to be that, because from like a live theater background, that just feels right in terms of the overall cadence, the overall arc of a theatrical experience. And the other thing too is I want so for the audience, I think 60 to 90 minutes is a more digestible bite, and it just makes sense, I think, theatrically. And for the players, like, I never want to limp across the finish line. Like, I never want to be like exhausted at the end of a session. I want it to be like, we've done a thing. This was a cool thing. There's some pathos or some kind of like relief at the end, or a cliffhanger, but I want it to be very deliberate and fun for the players. It's a lot easier, even after a long day, to get up and be excited for a 90-minute show. I think it's harder to get players to commit all of their enthusiasm if they know they're going to be in a booth for 4 hours. That's just a lot of time. So yeah, this kind of slots in. It takes up probably less time in a month than everyone's like regular TTRPGs that they're like playing around a dining room table with their friends. So there's a method to it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It also forces me as a GM to be a little more deliberate.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's no such thing as random encounters for me. Everything is pretty. Every person they come across, every conversation they have, all of it ultimately feeds the story in some way. If I had 3 hours, I'd feel like I'd need to fill some time. But 60 to 90 minutes, it's just you see a person, you have a meaningful conversation, you go here. We're going to skip past all of the roll dice until you roll a number high enough for me to read from my script kind of thing. It's just everything is interesting all the time, or at least that's what I'm trying.
Yeah. I made a change to that in my DMing, and it felt like a much smoother and more fun campaign by doing that. Like, it's just, let's just get to the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And if it feels better for you, it's going to feel better for your players. Folks can tell when their GM is tired.
All right, so you get to Blaseball through COVID, and had the idea from Joey to start you started the broadcasting, and then you moved to let's do an actual play show.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick the rest of the cast?
So these are folks that I've worked with in improv for years. They're 4 folks: Joey, Marissa, Kaylee, and Bridget. And the 4 of them are incredibly well-rounded people. Like, have you ever met someone that you meet them and they're good at one thing, and the more you get to know them, they're good at 3 or 4 things, and it kind of makes you look at your life and say, why am I not good at 3 or 4 things? All of the people in this show are that. They all have this incredibly deep pool of professional skills and personal experiences. They're also all exceptional improvisers. And on top of that, they're all good, strong actors. So, and they also approach, and so I've worked with them and I've seen all of their skills before. And we're frequent collaborators on things. And I've worked with every conglomeration of them in various, improv and sketch things. Yeah, I mean, we cast the show, so to speak, over the course of a 30-second conversation between me and Joey. And it wasn't even, so who do we want for this? It's well, good news. Bridget's free because I just asked her, and Marissa and Kaylee are free. All right, great. I'll see you in an hour. It just went that fast.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, I did look up their acting resumes, and yeah, they're all very accomplished.
Yeah, I am. You can take the measure of someone by those they associate with. So I always try to associate people who are smarter and more talented than I am, and I think I found the group.
Yeah, they're great. I think they do a really good job. Okay, so found the group, started recording, and I was curious about the sort of shared workload for the show, because it seems to me like Joey is doing a lot of the more show part of it, and you're doing the DMing part of it, if that makes sense. He, like you said, he's the producer, but you're the director, and that sort of equivalency.
Yeah. I to kind of borrow a very nerdy theater term. Kind of Joey hosts the show diegetically. I'm sorry, Joey hosts it non-diegetically, and I host it diegetically. Yeah. So Joey brings people into the world. He welcomes everyone. He talks about the rules. He introduces the cast, and then he throws it over to me. And all of a sudden, when I'm talking, we're now in the world. So, so that works out pretty well. To have someone do essentially emceeing, I think allows people to kind of tuck into the narrative a little bit quicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a little introduction, I'm forgetting that, the guy that did that for I'm remembering the Futurama parody, The Scary Door, but it wasn't that. It was the other. What was it called?
Was it Tales of Interest?
Well, yeah, I know that one's another one, but
Was it the one where the Richard Nixon one? I need to know now, and I'm going to look it up later. But like
the
when you have,
Twilight
like,
Zone. That's what I was trying to think of.
oh yeah, wasn't it called the Scary Door in Futurama, or was that something
Yeah,
else?
that's what I was saying. Like it was called
Okay,
the
yeah, I
Scary
thought it
Door
was
in
called
Futurama.
that.
Yeah. But Tales of Interest is a different one. That's one, but hosted by Jonathan Frakes, but a very similar format.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But yeah, I find it works out really, really well, and Joey's kind of a natural at it too. So he sets everything up, and then when I start talking, I say like, okay, here we go, and then we're just kind of there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a feature of the system, but it also felt like you're very player led in what's going on with like the setting and the theme, pretty much everything except the monster.
More or less, yeah. And that kind of goes into improv or TTRPGs for an audience perspective, which is no idea that I have is going to be decisively better than any idea anyone else at the table has. So what I do, like there are some sessions where I'll go in and say, okay, everybody, let's set the stage. You have just returned from New Hampshire. You have saved all of these people. Kaylee, your character is infected with a mind control poison, and also there's, a monster clawing its way out of the Boston Harbor. What do you want to do this episode? And then whoever says, well, I think now's a good time to break into that building and steal that artifact. I'd be like, great, we're doing a heist episode. And that is kind of the least amount of planning I am able to do, is I just kind of summarize, hey, here's where we're at. Here are the things going on in the world. What do you want to interact with? And then they kind of click on it. And then we go in that direction. So some things are very, very unplanned and very player-led. And so I must rely on my understanding of like the meta story and ultimately where I want like this phase of the season to go. And I try to find ways to kind of infuse the greater narrative into whatever individual things that they choose to do. There are also times where things are a little more on rails. Like if there's some really, really interesting, let's call it an encounter. Like there's a really, really interesting encounter that they're going to do because I think it'll be cool for them to do it in front of an audience. That's very heavily planned. Like there's this one episode where, so in Blittle League, the characters are, they start season 1 as like 9 or 10-year-old Little League players in a world of horror and magic and angels and devils and secret societies and stuff. And they have to play Little League because it quiets old scary gods that like live in the ground. Like that's actually what Blaseball is like, all of these players have to play this game of Blaseball or else like the world ends. And so, we kind of carried that into Blittle League. So anyway, the reason why I bring that up is there was this one episode in season 1 where they are going to another town to play a Blittle League game, and every stadium is different. Like one stadium is just a bunch of boats lashed together in Boston Harbor. One stadium is like surrounded by intelligent weeds. And one stadium that they went to was essentially a giant sentient tree that brought everyone into a shared hallucination. And every inning of Blittle League was another challenge they had to do in this hallucination. So it was like this weird kind of wacky dream where they all had to like do, kind of zany stuff and like win a baking contest and fight a mech with another mech and all of these different things.
Cool.
And I wanted that to happen. Like I said, all right, everyone, you're going to Braintree, Massachusetts. You sit down under the Braintree. Braintree's a real town in Massachusetts, by the way. You sit down under the Braintree, which is both the field and the coach of the team. And all of a sudden, you're in a dream world and you're doing crazy stuff. Like, I wanted that to happen, and so I scripted out the innings. I didn't script out what they needed to roll or what they needed to do to win every inning. I just said, hey, here's your prompt. Like, you know, you're in a baking contest all of a sudden. What do you bake? And they could do anything and roll anything. But that's like super, super planned. And then everything else is somewhere in the middle. So I would say on the balance, Blittle League is probably one of the most player-led TTRPGs you could probably see. A good few dozen episodes. As a challenge to myself, I show up with a blank sheet of paper in front of me and say, all right, here we go. But yeah, it's fun, and so that's what I think is cool when I watch improvisers perform. Is when you're watching really good improvisers, you'll just sit there and think, how the heck is none of this written down? Like, how are they just naturally finding this? And I am like pleased as punch when I get to bring that kind of, when I get to showcase the cast's virtuosity by letting them know that nothing is planned and anything they choose to do is a good idea. Or to borrow an observation from another GM friend of mine, the dice will tell you if it's a good idea. So, like, the players are going to have an idea. Like, one player will have an idea. You know, Marissa says we should do this. Cool. That sounds great. The dice will tell us if it works or not, but that sounds great. And there's no argument because people aren't trying to discern, what does John want us to do? Or, what would make most sense for the plot? It's like, yeah, we need an artifact. How do you get it? I think it's in a bank vault, and so we're going to rob a bank. Or, I'm pretty sure we could buy it on the black market. Or, it's almost certainly suspended in a cloud that is kept unnaturally aloft by evil magic. Literally anything the players say, I'll say, all right, roll for it. And if they roll high enough, I'm like, yeah, you're right, that's it. Shockingly. It's in a bank or it's in a cloud. And then we just go hunt down that bank or that cloud.
Quick, efficient.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I think anyone that makes art, whatever your art is, if you're, you work in visual media or you record videos or you sing or you're a GM or an actor or a poet or whatever you do, you should always make art that you personally would enjoy. And so I tend to like narratives that are quick and efficient and feel like they don't have a lot of fat on them. And so that's the show that I want to do. Like, I don't think I would enjoy, and I don't listen to really any live plays, but I imagine I wouldn't enjoy a 3-hour session where like 20 minutes of it are the players arguing about what the right course of action is.
Mm-hmm. Or
like when someone says something really enthusiastically and then everyone else at the table says, no, let's talk about it first. If I was watching that on a stage or on TV, I'd be like, geez, this is taking a while. Why is someone else's non-existent idea better than the one that someone already said and is excited about? The dice will tell you if it's a good idea, not the other players.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And yeah,
I feel the same way. I feel like the better actual plays that I've listened to are ones that maybe they still have those types of conversations when they're playing, but they edit it heavily down to remove a lot of that stuff that, just isn't interesting.
I would assume so. Yeah, I mean, the sense I get from friends of mine that listen to a lot of live plays is a lot of them are heavily edited, like exactly what you said. What's interesting is our shows, because we do them live, we do very, very light editing. And by very, very light editing, I mean we usually, I think, snip off a few minutes at the beginning of just some logistical stuff. But I don't think we've ever edited content out, ever. So I think it's a testament to how good the cast
Yeah.
is we think everything we do is show worthy. And also, I think it'd be weird if because it's not just a live play, like it's a live play, like you're watching it live. And I think it'd be weird if like we did a 90-minute show and then, when the recording pops up online, a couple weeks later, it's a 70-minute show. What happened to those 20 minutes? That's canon. Something canon happened in there.
Oh, I mean,
so we want to, I think, keep it as is.
Harmon Quest did that, and that worked. But they also included a bunch of animation, so maybe that's not a good comparison.
Hey, you know what? If you have a budget for animation, why not?
Well, I know other televised improv shows like Taskmaster or Whose Line Is It Anyway have a lot of content that they cut out.
It's Whose Line's interesting because they might film for 5 or 10 hours to get maybe 90 minutes, something like that. I mean that's also a television show, so there's a lot of like dead time that you're recording, but like if you watch Whose Line live is great. Like it's like if it ever comes to anyone's town, like go see it. They're really, really good. But they will pick out the most polished bits for television. It's great that they have the luxury to do that, but I think for Little League, because again, we're spending virtually no time looking at character sheets. We're spending virtually no time like adding up stuff on dice. There's very little that we need to trim out to make it as efficient as we want it to be. So we just keep everything in there.
Yeah. I think it works. So before I forget about it, what was the transition like for the show when the official Blaseball closed down?
Surprisingly undramatic, actually. There wasn't, like, we didn't all, like, get together and say, geez, do we want to keep doing this or not? Like, we just kept doing it because we really like it. What's nice, too, is what we do is not, like, beholden to Blaseball. So, like every season of Blaseball, like, there are, like, new rules and new stuff. It's like Warhammer 40K, like, releasing new books with, like, rules changes every year. Like, I don't need to keep up with any of those. We're just like, an alternate universe version of Blaseball. So when Blaseball went away, we kept doing the show. Nothing has changed. It kind of makes it easier because there feels like less of a pressure to stick to some kind of like canon events happening in Blaseball. Like Blaseball's done. Like they've retired. Uh-huh. So like I don't need to say, oh, Blaseball introduced this concept of like scary weather that teleports their best player to another dimension or something that I might then feel compelled to like turn into a gaming mechanic. Like I don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I could just like run the game. Yeah.
Yeah, do it your way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the world then. Blaseball has, like you said, different teams that play to satisfy evil gods, or else the world will be destroyed. So it's sort of like this funky ritual of playing weird baseball to satisfy Cthulhu. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, more or less. Like that's what Blaseball is. Like in the marrow of its bones. It's like we must play this horrifying sport where players get incinerated or like launched into space or sent to a shadow realm because the gods demand it of us. So that's kind of the soul of it, the marrow of the game. But the thing that's really cool about Blaseball is so much of it is like deliberately mysterious. The producers of Blaseball will say, hey, for season 15, here's one page of the changes that we're going to do to the league. And most of that page is redacted, like a government file or something. And you'll only see a few words on the page. And so part of the fun is, as fans of Blaseball watch Blaseball and like bet their imaginary currency on things happening, more and more of the mystery kind of unravels and reveals itself. That's one kind of philosophical element that I wanted to bring into Blittle League. I wanted it to be a horror game, and I wanted there to be mysteries within mysteries that are constantly kind of revealing themselves. So, in Blittle League, the whole concept is these kids are playing in a world of horrors. They have to. The reason why they have to, we don't entirely know, but they have to. And so that's kind of one of the overarching mysteries is like, why must you play? What happens if you don't play? And then most of the Monster of the Week stuff has some element of mystery to it where something must get discovered. And then there are like grander mysteries because, one kind of concept in improvised storytelling is to ask yourself, if this is true, what else is true?
Right.
We live in a world of like horrors and magic and scary stuff. Well, if that's true, what else is true? Well, it means that kids have powers too. Okay, that means that when kids are playing a sport, they're using magic and doing powerful stuff. Okay, cool. Well, if that's true, what else is true? Well, the umpires probably need to wear power armor. That makes sense. Okay, well, if that's true, what else is true? Sometimes umpires go mad with power and take their power armor on rampages. Okay, well, if that's true, what else is true? Adults still have some power, too. Like, their power may fade as they go into adulthood, but there are some adults that want to regain their power. And so all of a sudden we have a whole raft of villains that are, doing evil, scary science to try to regain the powers of their youth or whatever. And, well, if that's true, what else is true? Obviously there are secret societies. You just constantly ask that, and that's a really fun way to do what I like to call vertical world building, where every new realization, every new bit of the world is tied to something else in the world.
Stacking
so it's like
pieces
of
lore on top of each other. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Exactly. Yeah. So the world itself is really, it's a modern setting, but there's magic, there's angels, there's devils, there's multiplanar beings, there are secret societies, and the most powerful people in the world are kids. And as they get older, they start to lose their power, unless they keep playing Blaseball. That allows them to retain their power. But the older you get, the harder it is. Just like, there are several million Little Leaguers in this country and only a couple hundred professional baseball players. So as you go through the funnel of, from youth to adulthood, you lose your powers and your sense of identity. One thing that's interesting, too, is when Joey said, hey, we want to run this game, it's a horror game. You can't really do a ton of jump scares in TTRPGs. So I was trying to figure out, what are the elements of horror I want to incorporate? A lot of the things are the loss of youth is kind of an overarching theme of horror. People driven to madness because they're trying to chase past glory. That's an element of horror. What happens when kids are spoiled and really powerful? Like there's a Twilight episode about that. Threatening loved ones in the game. That's an element of horror. The tension of letting people down. There's only so many, horrible, like non-Euclidean nightmare monsters I could describe, but I can tap into these like core feelings of like loss and fear and jealousy, and that's what we're able to do. And it's also, for me anyway, it feels like it's a lot easier to do because it's a modern setting with magical realism in it. That's for my money, I think X-Files is some of the most kind of perfect examples of modest budget psychological serialized horror. Very rarely is the X-Files scary because a horrible monster jumps out of a closet. It's a lot more like there are powers beyond what you understand. Someone knows the truth and they are not believed. Something should be one way and it's another way. It's very atmospheric. It's very emotion and character based. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the kind of horror I wanted to put in, which again, modern world with magical elements. It's kind of perfect for that sort of horror. Though every so often I do release some monster into the world and they got to deal with it.
It's reminding me of Star Trek where a lot of the, they'll face some problem, but it's rarely solved through violence. They have to think their way around it.
Mm-hmm. And dare I say, feel their way around it.
Yeah.
Like, next gen is a moral quandary every episode.
Yeah.
It's like every episode's like a Lincoln Douglas debate. It's like, okay, what wins here? Quality of life or sanctity of life? Freedom of choice or egalitarianism? Like that's what next gen is everything's this moral argument, and I think that works really well with episodic TV, and especially with kind of modern horror. Is okay, we can beat this scary thing, but at what cost? And actually, Monster of the Week's a great system for that because of the dice mechanics. Essentially, the players roll 2 six-sided dice. If they get a 10 or higher, full success. If they get a 6 or lower, they fail. But a 7 to 9 is a partial success, which means, okay, you do a little of what you want to do, but the world gets a little more complicated. So there's a lot of this moral gray that's constantly being suffused into the world, which just creates a nice bubbling cauldron where people need to make like big impactful decisions all the time. They're constantly compromising and figuring things out like that. So it's why I think the shows are like, it's why I think they only need to be 60 to 90 minutes, because I think all the players go through a pretty big emotional workout too, because they're rolling partial success after partial success, because statistically that's what you're going to get, which means, okay, we did a little bit of this, but this gets worse. It's like if you've ever played the game Space Team. It's like an iOS game where, you and your friends are on a spaceship and it's breaking faster than you can fix it. It's like that. Like that's what's great about Monster of the Week is eventually, though, the dice work out and all the chaos comes to an end at some point, either in victory or defeat. But the journey to get there is constantly, trading stone for wood and trading, sheep for grain and all of these things to try to get there.
So is the Blaseball world Earth, or like a sort of adjacent Earth, an Earth after Cthulhu has arrived? What's the idea there?
For sake of our little Blittle League slice of it, it's Earth if magic, Earth if angels and demons. There actually is in the lore of this world, like what I try to do is, well, one thing I'm tripping over my own words because I'm so darn excited. Because Blaseball is baseball with an L in it, Blittle League is Little League with an extra B on it. Sometimes the differences between like the real world and the Blittle League version is very just silly nods to the fact that it's like a parallel world. Like, there's a very unique soft drink in Maine called Moxie, but in Blittle League it's called Chutzpah. Burger King would be Blurger King, stuff like that. Just little nods to the fact that it's a different world. But also we get to play the if this is true, what else is true concept when we kind of rewrite certain historical events. So like, some combination of past wars in Blittle League is just called the war. And the war resulted in like the complete destruction of the state of Connecticut. So there's now this like post-apocalyptic wasteland in Connecticut, but Boston's still fine. We want there to be like a subway and tall buildings, so they exist there. It's just one of the tall buildings has someone with infinite money, and the governor of Massachusetts is a devil that escaped from hell, and things like that. So it is very similar to Earth when the plot calls for it, and it can be very different from Earth when the plot calls for it. But after 130 plus episodes of kind of collective storytelling, everyone has a pretty shared language of how the world works. Like, for instance, in our last episode, which we recorded the other day, Joey's character, someone that he owed a favor to was gonna see him, wanted to come to him and call in the favor. So I said, Joey, you're somewhere. It's nighttime. You're alone, and you're lost in contemplation. Where are you? And he said, "Oh, I'm in Marblehead, Massachusetts," which is an actual town, like Braintree is. And before I even said anything about Marblehead, Massachusetts, Joey said, "So named because of the giant marble heads on the coastline." And I'm like, yeah, of course that's why Marblehead's called Marblehead. Yeah. The real Marblehead does not have giant marble heads, but this one does. And some of those differences that are just kind of funny, that are just constantly a reminder that this is like a world of like magic and scary stuff. Some of them just add to the color. Others of them come back and be ultimately somewhat important in terms of the plot. Especially because, as we were just talking about, a lot of what we do is like kind of self-referential. Like, I will never introduce a new NPC if one of our 300 previous NPCs will do. So the lore just keeps getting deeper and deeper.
That's just good storytelling.
Yeah, I think it works out pretty well. Like, and also, one thing I wanted to avoid was just that trope of like just people going from one town to another, solving a problem and moving on. Like, all the towns here feel really lived in. So like pretty much most of Eastern Massachusetts in Blittle League has kind of a personality to it. Like, people will, like, the players will instinctually like want to go to this town for this kind of vibes. They want to go here for that. Like, they have favorite restaurants. They have hangout spots. They have places that they don't want to talk about because they're scary. And that just feels like it's so much more lived in. So we got a jump start on making everything feel lived in because we started from a base of this is kind of Earth. Yeah. And we just kind of extrapolated from there with the if this is true, what else is true game.
So I made this comparison when I was listening to the show that Blittle League feels very similar to getting like a Pokemon training license where you're 10 years old, you get to finally play Little League, and then you're gifted with a bunch of power and basically removed from adult supervision, and you can kind of do whatever you want and go fight monsters.
Pretty much. I have not heard it described that way, but that is perfect. We used to joke a lot in the first season, like, literally, like they're in a basement filling with water and they're fighting skeletons, and they're like, "Geez, this is really dangerous." And then they'll all kind of look at each other and shrug and be like, "Well, our parents did sign those permission slips, So there's just that feeling of, yeah, you hit a certain age and then you're kind of thrust into this scary world where not only is the world scary, but you as children are more capable than your parents of navigating it. And that's kind of an inherent scariness too, is, these kids don't have parents that they can run to if they're hurt, because whatever hurt them will hurt their parents even worse. So yeah, it's like that. And also that kind of concept in season 1, I think led to kind of that magical feeling of youth. Like, even if you don't live in a world of like magic and angels and devils and secret societies, like, there's something really cool about, being a kid and getting on your bike and riding through town and, going home from your friend's house after it's already dark out and, taking a shortcut through the woods. Like, I grew up in like a suburban setting where like I got to do those things. Like, there were fireflies when I grew up, like, my town had like the neighborhood pool and like the big clock downtown and rumors of like a skate park in the middle of the woods and like all of these really kind of magical Stranger Things-esque things. And so that feeling of like the excitement of youth can be ramped up if all the players are playing 10-year-olds and there's actual magic. So it captures the vibe we want to.
Yeah. Man, I miss fireflies. It was nice being able to go out and see them.
Yeah. I recently saw them. I was went to a family member's house for like a family party, and they live kind of in a very lovely, like, bucolic corner of the world, and like we left their house, in their front yard there were just fireflies kind of winking all over the place, and like that kind of slammed me back to the magic of being young again. I need to do something with fireflies in Little League. I don't know what yet. But yeah, they're magical by their very nature, so I think I got to incorporate them somehow.
So there's all these little details that I noticed listening, like that Zlobs has a driver's license somehow with an odd piece for a 10-year-old, but that all the other powers, that's the least of the odd things.
Which in a way makes it the most odd. It's like it's somehow more believable that like Kaylee's character Mindy is a psychic that was created in a lab, or Bridget's character Darby is an angel that was kicked out of heaven. Like those things are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But all of a sudden, Zlobs has a driver's license at 10? That's just weird.
It's just so mundane. Like, oh, what's your superpower? I can drive.
Yeah, that's really it. Which, when you're 10 years old, is a heck of a superpower. Yeah, his superpower, like, so he's surrounded by, an electric witch, a literal angel, and one of the world's most powerful psychics. And Joey's character Zlobs is like, well, I've got a car and grenades. It's like, cool. You're all ready. So yeah, I think because again of like kind of the vertical storytelling and how lived in everything is, there are a lot of details like that in the world. And what's cool about those details is and this is just kind of my philosophy on stakes as a GM, is like, if you want to create stakes for your players, like, don't threaten them with damage. Like, you can heal damage, unless you're playing Riddle of Steel, then you can't. But, like, they can heal damage. Like, no, the way to raise the stakes is to, like, threaten something they know and care about.
Yeah.
Like, and you can't just create something in session 140 and threaten it in 141. It's like, no. That thing you've been holding on to since session 5, that enemy of yours that became a friend is now in trouble. Like, those things are much more emotionally evocative than just like, all right, you take 10 damage. Because, like, I don't know, you can take a long rest and get that back. And what's cool is, like, anytime one of the players says something interesting. Oh, also, one thing, too, that's kind of fun since we do it live, is I'm often asking our audience for NPC names, NPC characteristics, places, overall vibes. Like, the audiences kind of generated a lot of the characters in the setting. And so when those things get threatened, when those things are in trouble, when a character that an audience member named and created in session 10, like, staggers through the front door with, like, a stab wound and says they're coming before passing out, like, that's so much more evocative because there's all this investment in it now. So those details are really fun, and those details are also the hooks that I can put into the players and drag them into deep water.
Yeah, well, like you said, reusing characters, then they develop those emotional attachments.
Mm-hmm, yeah, for sure.
I think another thing I noticed when I was listening is that it seems like you're often having the players be the ones that are creating all these NPCs, and then you'll play them, but it feels like it's much more they're the ones that are describing the personality of a lot of the different characters they're meeting, and like the physical nature and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's, if I could, step up onto my soapbox and just like give advice to GMs out in the world, it's one of the hardest things that I think a lot of GMs need to do is convince their characters to trust an NPC. Especially newer gamers. Like, if you're a GM and you're playing with a bunch of people who are playing D&D for the first time, you're in a bar, someone comes in, offers them a job, and those players are like, I don't trust them. Like, the way around that is to say, okay, yeah, you're in this town, you're far from home, but hey, Bridget, someone here. What's their name? Oh, their name is, John Thompson. Cool. How do you know John Thompson? Oh, we went to, literary camp together. He and I wrote a play. Perfect. Now they know and trust John Thompson. Like, that's so much easier than trying to, as a GM, come up with something whole cloth and try to get the players to like them. You can just say to your players, hey, you see someone you really like. Who is it? Oh, it's, our math teacher, Miss Calendar. Cool. Why do you like her so much? Oh, my goodness. Like, she always brings in, quiche Lorraine. And if we get a good answer, to one of her pop quizzes, she'll give us a slice. Like some random thing. And I think I'm probably capable of making an NPC with that much texture, but it's harder for me to make an NPC with that much texture and then sell them to the players. So I might as well just have the players do it.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I do, and this is what I think gets our audience to really like our NPCs, is I try not to describe them by their appearance or their age or anything like that. I try to just describe them based on kind of the vibe or how they make the players feel or their actions. Like, I don't do too much voice acting. Like I'm not whipping out 300 different accents for 300 different NPCs. Nor am I like describing into it's like, okay, yeah, they're 6 feet tall, they're gray haired, they are wearing this color and they're wearing a cape and they have the. I just, you see someone that immediately commands your attention. They fill the doorway, not necessarily because they're terribly tall or terribly wide, but because they have the rehearsed presence of someone that's used to demanding your attention. And then everyone in the audience will color that in the way they want. And that will be more memorable to them than being like, yeah, they're like 6'2" and they have a cool haircut. Let the players do that, and let the audience do that. And one thing that's really cool, because like the people that listen to Blittle League are awesome and are artists in their own right. We get a lot of really cool fan art, and often like the fan art that we see about certain NPCs or certain scenes, that's the first time I fully picture it in my mind, is when I see the art that someone makes. Because I don't describe anything like all the NPCs that I have, there's no physical descriptions about any of them. It's just like what they do, what they believe in, who they are, how they make you feel.
Yeah, it reminds me of how like scripts are written, where like they'll do those kinds of like personality descriptions for characters instead of he's 6'5" and has a mustache and brown hair and green eyes. It's more like he looks tough and reliable, might be a way they describe him.
Exactly. It makes it really hard if you're doing it based on those kind of physical descriptors. Like in Hollywood, it makes it really hard to cast stuff, because you're no longer able to cast the best person for the role in terms of acting chops or gravitas. It's like, well, we need someone that's 6'5" and has all the things. One thing I really liked about the show Babylon 5 is they did all like kind of gender and appearance agnostic casting. So they just had people read all the scripts, and then when they cast certain people in the roles, they would write in the right pronouns and change some of the plot points a little bit. But that's actually one thing that's really, really cool about improv, is even in long form improv, you're not really cast to type. Like, there's not a lot of improv where it's like, okay, we need someone to play a detective, so we need to cast an improviser that's like 50 years old and owns a trench coat. Like, I have played 100-year-old talking trees and toddlers with bows in her hair and everything in between, because in improv you have the ability to do that. So yeah, I think that kind of carries into like how I create NPCs in this magical world. Is all I know is that there's an incredibly philanthropic minded, real estate baron in Boston. That's all I know about them. Hey, audience, what's their name? And they might give me a really cool name. I'll say, okay, audience, give me like 2 words about them. Maybe it's, meek and sleepy. Well, that's a heck of a lot different than what I would have come up with for like a real estate baron that's very philanthropic. So, okay, well, if the real estate baron that's very philanthropic is like meek and sleepy, well, that means they probably have a really impressive organization to do a lot of their work for them. So a lot of their gravitas comes from the fact that you hardly ever see them. you're dealing with functionaries and intermediaries and things like that, which, by the way, the players and the audience can name them too. So that dialogue allows me to create, I think, kind of type-defying NPCs that really works well in a world that's kind of like Earth, but with magic.
Right. So another little thing I noticed when I was listening to all of this was when the players were describing their characters initially, they also kind of stuck to like those personality descriptions. I mean, there's fan art, so it's easy to get like that you have on the website, so there's some reference, but the way they also described their sort of functionality within the game was mostly based off of their defensive positions, and not that baseball has offensive position, but players have offensive characteristics within baseball that were not really mentioned. It was mostly just a defensive position, which maybe that's a natural way to do it. I don't follow baseball that much, but it also felt like, based off what you're describing now, that the sort of defensive nature of what the game is doing for the society around it, maybe it makes sense to think of it in a more defensive sense.
Yeah, their positions kind of define them a little bit, or it did. And one thing that's interesting is in our current season, they're no longer playing Blaseball. They're in high school, and so they're continuing to practice Blaseball in the hopes that they will make the varsity team of the high school. But until then, they're in student clubs. So one thing that's interesting is, in season 1 and season 2, they've defined themselves as 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds by their positions and their powers. Now they're like 14, they're freshmen in high school. Well, those descriptors no longer apply. Who are they outside of those things? So all of a sudden, our power-hitting war angel is now like writing the school play because she's in the literary society. The super electric witch is now the class president. The ultra tactical catcher that has grenades and a driver's license is now learning how to be an umpire. Like the identity is sort of tied to their position and tied to their hobbies, and not necessarily tied to their stats, which is cool. One thing I absolutely love about the players in this game is they often don't try to maneuver it so they're rolling their best roll to solve a problem. They'll just roll whatever makes sense. Like, there's someone that has the equivalent of like super low charisma. They're constantly trying to convince people to do stuff. Like, they're just very outgoing. It's the War Angel. It's Bridget's character. Mm-hmm. She's a War Angel. She has spent hundreds and hundreds of years like fighting demons with a flaming sword, and now she's on Earth constantly trying to convince people to do the right thing, but she's only been a human for a few years, so like the nuances of conversation are lost on her, but it doesn't stop her from trying. So I just love that. It also suggests a lot of trust for me, the GM, because if they didn't trust me, they would try to get critical successes all the time, but instead they're just rolling whatever they think makes sense for the character.
Well, I mean, that's also how you get XP in the system, isn't it?
Yeah, though oddly, I never level them up. We're just having too much fun.
Well, I was curious because you said they've aged over time, whether Monster of the Week would still be an appropriate system for them at this point.
It is, because we're not leveling them up. Monster of the Week and a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse systems have kind of a natural retirement for characters. Right. Like, you kind of level up a few times and then eventually you become an NPC or some trusted advisor. What I wanted to do was modify it a little bit. So between season 1 and season 2, they leveled up. So like their players got stronger. From season 2 to season 3, they leveled up, but their characters didn't get stronger. They just got to move their stats around. Which suggests the fact that the further removed from youth you are, the weaker you get in this world. So they didn't become stronger between season 2 and season 3. I just said you can decrease a stat by 1 and increase a stat by 1, and also you'll get a new power. But this new power is really tied more to your development as a person, as opposed to like you now do more damage. It's going to be really interesting from season 3 to season 4, depending on how far in time we jump. Because I think from season 1 to season 2, we jumped like 6 months, and season 2 to season 3, they jumped like 3 years, and they didn't know they would. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, Monster of the Week still applies just because I'm not leveling them up.
Okay. Yeah. If it still works, it still works.
Mm-hmm.
Does Monster of the Week have a... Like, I'm familiar with, like, at least the normal concept, roll 2d6 and partial success. But is there good stuff for downtime, like when you're not in doing, like, rolls for... like out of combat, out of investigation mode kind of stuff?
Yeah, functionally. Just because I keep it, the way I use it is just kind of simple. Like a lot of kind of the rolling mechanics are investigate a mystery, read a bad situation. Like investigate a mystery is I'm in mystery solving mode. I need to gather information. Read a bad situation is, oh, I think something bad's about to happen, and then like kick butt rolls are you're now fighting somebody. But most of the time they're not in combat, so often they're just kind of rolling. All of like the long-term projects and the downtime are all kind of managed narratively. Like there are some great systems that have like super cool downtime mechanics, like anything with like like long-term like project counters and things like that,
right,
where you can like work on something for a really long time, or like you have a deliberate like downtime action between encounters. But since Blittle League is much encounter based, like it's still very much like episodic, but not every episode is most episodes aren't combat based at all, really. Like our last episode was really just like 2 very, very scary conversations, and in between them was a less scary conversation. So it was like 3 super dramatic scenes in a row, and then we called it after like 75 minutes. So a lot of the downtime actions are like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Like, hey, like all the plant life in Boston is slowly dying and no one knows why. Do you want to like kind of move in that direction of figuring it out? And then we kind of do a little bit of what you would call downtime action about that. And then when we kind of click into encounter mode, all of a sudden we're rolling a lot more dice. But I guess I wouldn't say Monster of the Week. There are systems that are better for downtime action or oscillating between downtime and combat time, or downtime and like unravel a mystery time. Yeah, but the way Blittle League works, they kind of just flow back and forth pretty easily. Lates in the Dark, super cool for downtime. I really like. It's almost like there are 2 different games. There's like managing your gang, and then there's getting into ultra dangerous fights with other people.
Right. Yeah, I think it's great stuff. I was just curious how it was for Monster of the Week, but yeah, that's fine too.
There are other powered by the Apocalypse systems, because it's kind of like open source, and so there are a lot of different, like 2d6 with the partials thing that are being like moved into other systems. There are other permutations of it that I think have more of a separation. What I will say about Powered by the Apocalypse overall is that, if the core mechanic is like 2d6 with partial successes, you really can bend and shape that however you want. So there are a lot of creators that have made things that are much more conducive to like super heavy combat based stuff. Like I'm actually thinking of making a kind of a rules. So there's a, like, I don't know if you've seen it or played it. There's a kind of a mech combat game called Lancer.
Yeah.
It's beefy. Like it's a beefy rules heavy system. It's super fun. And I want a more rules light version of that. And I kind of want it to be Powered by the Apocalypse, but with 2 character sheets, like you in the mech and you outside the mech. So I can do kind of fun kind of fun.
Do
stuff
I have
like
the system for you? Beam Saber.
Oh man, do you like Beam Saber? Is it good stuff?
I have not actually played it, but I have interviewed the creator on the show.
Well, that creator has just made a sale. I'll probably pick it up. Pick it up after we hang up.
There's a couple different like supplements for it, but the base one is mechs, but it can be sort of adapted for cars or motorcycles or planes, any sort of like vehicle and person attachment.
Nice.
I think there's a supplement for playing like Attack on Titan, that kind of like
that's cool.
Vertical equipment things.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Monster in the Week. What's the character creation process for that? Like you're assigning stats, and then I think usually there's some sort of special ability kind of thing that you get.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sushi list. There's not like a stat buy. You pick your class first, and I think maybe a dozen base classes, and then they released a few more. So let's call it like 24 you could choose from. And so you pick the class first, and if you're going really by like the rules as written, they're like every class has like 4 or 5 different general physical descriptions, 4 or 5 different stat loadouts, and so you like click the button for like, and this is what I look like, and then you click the button for, okay, I have like good toughness and bad charisma, or I have, good sharp and okay charisma, or whatever it is. Like they're like, kind of stat packs you check off, and then you pick a couple of skills, and then the level up process. And again, I don't level
which
up
you
that
don't
much.
use.
Which I don't use. I hear it's great. You choose from like another sushi menu of like you can increase a stat, but one of only 2. You only have 2 of your 5 stats you can increase, or you can learn a new skill, or you can rearrange some stats. So that's kind of it. It's, as far as character creation goes, it's really fast, which makes Monster of the Week really good for kind of single session games. And you could even, as a GM, you could even cut that down even more. We have the players have like 1 or 2 kind of alternate characters, because we did like a few episodes in Chicago instead of Boston, and so they have like a Chicago team, and the character creation for that was the Monster of the Week character sheets, but I filled in most of them already. I'm like, just pick some stats and a name, and are you a tree or a minotaur or whatever you are, and then we did that. But it's great for building characters quickly. Honestly, I feel like Monster of the Week is such, like, I think it's great for streaming because, again, character creation is fast. There's narrative stuff built right into the mechanics. But it's also really, really good as a system for showing it to people who are gaming for the first time. Like, if you're one of those folks that's like wants to turn your like weekly board game night into like maybe a weekly TTRPG night, like Monster of the Week is such an easy system to do that. It's so much less like daunting than D&D. It's just a lot of folks start with D&D, but I've had a lot of successful indoctrinations using like one of the Powered by the Apocalypse systems.
I feel like D&D is better for a lot of people because there's a lot more structure. If they don't have that like improv mindset when they come into the game, having like different buttons you can push that are very like, you have your 5 buttons to push. You can attack, move, cast a spell, drink a potion, or make a silly face,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of people thrive on rules.
Yeah.
Because it gives you structure. I think what gets scary is like if you're so like if you hand someone a pre-generated character sheet and say, all right, we're going to play D&D, cool. But that pre-generated character sheet may be 4 pages long and have a whole lot of rules on it, which is why I think it's like if you can get past character creation, D&D has a lot of structure that a lot of people gravitate to, but I think I think for a lot of people, it's the equivalent of like, you're 100 years old, you've been using a VCR your whole life, and then someone handed you like a Fire Stick. It's like, geez, there are a lot of new buttons here. Like, once you figure it out, it's all pretty intuitive, and there's only so many buttons you can push. But yeah, like I've walked folks through like 5th edition character creation who have never picked up dice before, and I've walked folks through like Monster of the Week character creation, and like Monster of the Week just goes so much faster.
Oh yeah.
But if I really want them to be playing in 1 minute, then we play Honey Heist, and good news, you're a bear. That's everything you need to know. Yeah. But also, that game has no structure at all, so it's just a sliding scale of like, do I want quick start time and no structure? Do I want extensive start time and a ton of structure? What's nice, though, is, and I'm sure you see this because you get to talk to so many people about it, like, we're kind of living in a golden age of systems. There's really there's not only just one system for every type of GM or player, there are 24 for every type of GM or player.
Yeah, it feels very much like when Wizards like tried to change the licensing stuff, that a lot of people ran away and started making their own systems, and now there's like so many choices. It's really a nice time to be in the hobby if you're willing to explore those alternatives to like the big standard ones.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's fun about going to like a PAX or like a PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. That's all board game and TTRPG based, or even going to like any regional con where you've got like, tabletop game developers there. It's really fun to, go look at the thing that's like being kickstarted right now that's like super shiny and all the rules work. But it's just as fun to like go to the back of the expo hall into the, the ideas corner of the hall to see someone that's like, okay, we're using playing cards right now because I don't have any meeples, but the idea is, Warhammer 40K army mechanics, but everyone is a talking plant. And it's like, oh my god, I had no idea I need that in the world, but I definitely do. So it's so fun to see the amount of creativity in terms of systems, and also kind of the shared shorthand that we now all have.
Yeah, it is. Great creative example there of the talking tree.
Yeah, it's like, I'd love to play some Ultramarines, but I'd rather they be a ficus with a gun. It's like, good news. Someone's developing that right now.
Yeah, that's everything at your fingertips. And solid, like, frameworks for developing your own stuff. Like, once you've got the basics of, like, an Apocalypse World system, like, I feel like you almost could create your own system for doing Little League Blaseball at this point if you wanted to.
For sure.
Just because it's so simple for the basics, like, just here's some stats, and here's your arrangement, and here's some special abilities, and we made 20 of them, and, pick one or two, and good to go.
And that's it. And so many, it's you're dressing up the mannequin of Apocalypse World. You could put a cowboy hat and spurs on it. You could put a spacesuit on it. You could do whatever you want like that. The structure is there, and so as you said, it's an easy structure. That's what's just so fun about it. That's why I really dig it.
There's another thing I noticed about structure, not for the system, but for the way that I saw the way the players were interacting with the world, that I wanted to get your input on, and also maybe see if it's changed over time. But what I was seeing was that the players were mostly interacting with you during the session, or maybe a little bit with Joey, or Zlobs, whatever. And, I'm watching, like, really early episodes. Like, I watched the first 3 and the 9th episode, because that's what Marissa had recommended. And it seems like that might have just been, like, some sort of nervousness going in, where we're all interacting with the GM, because he controls the rest of the world, right? when usually when I'm listening to an actual play, there's a lot more interaction between the players as well. So I'm curious if that's something that's changed over time, or maybe because you're having a much tighter recording, that maybe that's just the way that your style has worked out. Do you have any?
I think it depends on the episode. It's definitely moved. Probably 20, 25 episodes in when things started really getting lived in. And the players knew enough about each other's characters. Yeah, there all of a sudden became a lot more dialogue between them and a lot less dialogue between me and them. Like this most recent episode that I was talking about, where it was like big scary conversation, less scary conversation, big scary conversation. The less scary conversation in the middle was a 30-minute scene in which maybe I said a couple of sentences. Because it was all of them just talking it out. Not even in a problem-solving way. They were literally talking as like 9th grade friends. And there's so much more room for that as the world gets fleshed out. You know, I think players get to interact with other players a lot. You know, either diegetically or non-diegetically. So like non-diegetically is like, all right, everyone, let's stop for a second. Let's talk about how we are going to infiltrate this castle. And if there's a live play where there's a lot of like tactical planning like that and a lot of like arranging yourselves on the map, there's going to be a lot of player-to-player interaction because they're trying to solve the problem as players. There's also diegetic interaction where like they're sitting around a campfire and talking. And I think for probably longer sessions, there are probably more opportunities for that because, like, again, filling up, like doing a play for 3 hours and doing a play for 90 minutes, the scenes are just going to be different. Like the plot beats are going to be different. There's going to be a lot more of that downtime.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think for Little League, probably maybe 1 or 2 dozen episodes in, all of a sudden the dynamics shifted a lot. And there are just all of these great conversations between 2 of the characters, 3 of the characters, all 4 of the characters. And what's cool is sometimes it's about, gang, what do we do? And sometimes it's just like they're in a tree house eating lunch. They're passing notes in the back of a math class. They're, you know, trying to decide how to make a friend of theirs feel better. They're coming up with a talent for the talent show. And all of it is me letting them talk while I, you know, quietly enjoy like a Snapple peach iced tea and just like listen with a smile on my face.
I mean, great detail, and yeah, that's some of the stuff that I really enjoy as a DM as well, is when you can kind of have something work well enough that you can kind of just sit back and watch for a moment while the players take over and do their thing by themselves.
Yeah. And the whole time they're doing that, they are telling you what they want. Like, players are just constantly telling you what they want. If it's like, okay, you know, you show up at this, you know, at this fancy party, what do you all want to do? The first thing all of your players say is the thing they're most excited to do. So you just say, yeah, go. And if it's like, what do you want to do? It's like, I think we just want to hang out here. It's like, cool, hang out. And then I'm just like a waiter bringing them hors d'oeuvres while they're like having a conversation about their history, about what they want to do, about random little conversations about nothing at all. It's like that Tarantino idea of like keeping the camera rolling while like the 2 hitmen are in a diner talking about philosophy, or, you know, 2 people driving in a car. It's not just like the action. So when you give them room to just be these incredibly badass people and they're just talking about lunch or they're talking about vacation, is great. And especially because the cast is all improvisers. They can come up with a long-form improv game to play. Like, I just give them time, open-ended time. Because, again, I have nothing that I may necessarily want to do that session. And if the whole thing is they're having a pizza party for a friend of theirs that's feeling down, that's the first 45 minutes of the episode. I don't even need to say anything. Mm-hmm. They just get to talk, because then they're going to just start making up their own issues. Like, they might say, it's like, oh, geez, our friend Salamander has been bummed out for like a week. Let's take them to an amusement park. And maybe I'll just have them roll a die to see if there's a complication at the amusement park. And the complication is, oh yeah, the ride that you want to ride is down for maintenance. And then naturally they will decide amongst themselves they need to sneak past security and fix the ride themselves. And I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching them have this conversation. And every time they say, hey, you know what would work if I electrify the ride with magic? Then I can interject and say, yeah, give me 2d6 plus weird. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, the amusement park ride is now alive and wants human brains. And all I have done is ask them to roll, and that's it. They have crafted it all themselves through dialogue with each other and not with me.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I am a big fan.
Well, I've got a few more smaller questions here. I feel like I've worked through most of my big ones. First one is, Nick Winkler gets mentioned a few times. Is he one of the characters from the actual Blaseball browser game?
Yeah. That concept kind of faded out after Blaseball kind of went into its permanent hiatus, but yeah, that was one of the early nods to saying, it's like, yeah, hey, this is essentially a giant piece of fan art, so you're going to see a couple of familiar names in it. And yeah, I think Nick Winkler, that character, still canonically exists in the world. I don't think we've seen him in 100 some odd episodes, but it's nice to know he's out there somewhere.
Okay. The players mentioned a few times about capturing monsters and taking them back to Longstock Field, the baseball field they play at, to the dugout there, like almost as if that's like a spiritual prison that they're throwing the monsters in, like in Ghostbusters. I mean, maybe I misinterpreted that, but do you remember what they were talking about there? What they might have meant?
Yeah, like their home field, I asked them to describe it, and they gave me a whole bunch of different lore about it, and that lore became canonical. Like, there's tall grass growing along the foul line, and if you accidentally run into it, you may not come out, and countless balls have been lost in it, and it's down the street from an old military base, and the dugout has magical powers, and all of these different things. And yeah, I think we've used the dugout like that once or twice before, but what's cool is like every location, whether it's real to real Earth or made up for Little League's version of Earth, it's so easy to just like sneak a cool magic thing into it. Because like, you want to break into a building, there's not just like cameras and guards, there's magical security. If you want to crack open a chest, it's not just going to spray you with poison, it's going to drain some of your life essence. It's stuff like that we can sneak in kind of magical experience into all those things.
Okay, cool. I was sure I'd been misinterpreting that statement, but that's neat.
Yeah. Once someone says something, it's canon. We very rarely, if ever, retcon anything, so...
All right. There's a Little League baseball field that has a magical prison in it.
Mm-hmm.
Last little question I've got here is the Morgan has like this not Morgan, sorry, Darby is the angel girl.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about like the wing way a couple times, where I got the sense that it wasn't just I'll fly there, but more like I'll use my wings to teleport there kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's she got banished from heaven, but she was still able to kind of maintain some of her divine essence. And that divine essence is her ability to kind of use her wings, which signify her connection to heaven, to kind of create a portal to go through. Like Bifrost from like the Marvel version of Norse mythology. Like you go through this like tunnel in time. What's interesting, and like when we were talking before about, when when players get really attached to something, threatening that thing is a great way to raise stakes. Darby eventually lost her wings, and she lost access to the wingway. So one of her, like, on-the-sheet abilities went away, and they ended up tumbling into an alternate dimension that was like kind of a Victorian era, like brass and steam Boston, and she got a pair of mechanical brass wings, so she can no longer teleport, but she can now actually fly, which is kind of fun, and that was kind of a fun thing for her character, because for her, one of the horror elements of her character is this desire to return to the heaven she was banished from, but very early in the campaign, she lost the most tangible connection to it. And now she's like rebuilding it in her own way and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. It's got some connections to a lot of different mythology with an angel losing their wings.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, really neat. Final bigger question I've got for you is, I mean, you mentioned that the show is usually like Monster of the Week, as the system says. Have you introduced any like larger arcs that you feel like you want to talk about here, or are they ones you like want to save for people watching the show? Or can you give us a little hint at least? I'm not sure how to phrase those.
Yeah, every season kind of has a star to it. Like, there's something going on kind of all the time. Like, obviously, it's Monster of the Week, and there are all these mini arcs and stuff like that. There's like a grand narrative, and it's getting more grand as we go. But the big overarching arc of season 1 is kind of Zlob's, the catcher played by Joey, kind of making peace with a mistake that he is kind of destined to make. Like, he discovers he's ultimately responsible for something really bad, and we get to play a lot with like time and causation and stuff. And so season 1, there's all this other stuff happening, but this big arc is like, this was the Zlob season, where at the end of it, it culminates in him ultimately, kind of rewriting his history. And then season 2 was more of the Mindy arc, the psychic arc, where she discovers kind of who she is and why she was created, and what else was created at the same time that she was. Season 3 is really the Darby arc, where she is trying to resolve the issue that got her kicked out of heaven. And season 4, which is going to be our last season, is by process of elimination going to be the Morgan arc, and I already have an idea of where that's going to go, and it's going to involve it's going to involve a lot of kind of like adult pants economic and political intrigue. Like, it's a lot of episodes are going to switch more into like kind of political thrillers.
Okay.
So all of them are different, and so like if every season kind of has one character and what they're about being explored, within each season are mini arcs. Season 2, they were part of like a traveling team. So season 1, they were playing a lot in Summerville, Massachusetts, which is a suburb, and doing things in Summerville. Season 2, they're a year older. They joined a traveling team, and so they'd still be doing all this stuff in Summerville. And then we'd have these self-contained 5 or 6 episode arcs where they needed to travel to Maine and figure out if there were actually vampires in this town, or travel into the apocalyptic Connecticut, called the Exhausted Earth of Connecticut, to intercept something that was approaching Boston. So we have these kind of arcs that aren't just standalone. So of our 138 episodes, probably half of them are like really truly monster of the week, kind of self-contained narratives, and the other half are part of like these grander arcs. So I think that's kind of a fun mix for the audience. And what's cool is anytime, like if someone wants to pick up a random episode and we're in the middle of an arc in season 2, you're going to get 2 or 3 minutes of description at the beginning that'll give you all you need to be able to just sink right into it.
Oh, cool. Where can people find the show?
So yeah, if you're interested in Blittle League, the best way to find it live is twitch.tv/JoeyTBadger, badger like the animal. We also have a great Discord, and that gets linked in the Twitch every episode. So if you like the episode and want to join the Discord, you can do so. Also, you can look up Blittle League. That's Little League with a B at the beginning of it, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, the cast of Blittle League does a really, really fun festival show called Dungeons and To Be Determined, where we all start, every single one of us starts with a blank piece of paper, and over the course of an hour, we build a new TTRPG system with new dice and new mechanics and new classes and new everything, and then we play it. And you can get more info and our live festival recordings. We've done, I think, about 24 of them at dntbd.com.
All right, cool. Thanks, John.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, I think that's all the questions I've got for you. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
Just that, philosophically speaking, improv and TTRPGs go hand in glove. So if you are a gamer and haven't taken an improv class, take an improv class. They're super fun.
Yeah, good advice. Well, yeah, I think we're all set then. Thanks, John.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
That was John and Blittle League Blaseball. You can find out more about their show at blittleleague.com. That's Little League with a B at the start. A couple of show announcements. We're trying to get more people on the show as guests, so if you're interested, then you can fill out the survey form in the episode notes, or you can go to our website, gocorral.com/STS, to read more about the show and also fill out that survey. I've also been posting a bunch of questions to try and get your juices flowing on what you want to build for your campaign world. You can maybe already have an answer or come up with an answer. I've been posting these in the show's Discord, which is in the episode description, and also on the show's associated social accounts, so Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube. So you can check those out, and you can get some ideas and maybe have something that you want to bring on the show. That'd be really cool. And as always, this show is sponsored by Darren, and you can also be a sponsor of the show by joining our Patreon, where there's a link in the episode description. Thank you for listening.